Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off talking about Nintendo Gamecube and Wii emulation with Dolphin. And Dolphin just released their progress report for August, September, and October. There's a ton of information here. We're just going over it at a high level, and I'll drop a link to it in the description below and do recommend checking it out. So we may have talked about this one in a previous video, but if you didn't realize already, Dolphin on Windows now has a custom dark style. It was already available on macOS, Linux, and Android, but now Windows got one too. On top of that, Dolphin now has its own output resampler, and you can change this between area, bilinear, bicubic, sharp bilinear, and even more. And if you didn't know what any of this stuff is, Dolphin has you covered. At a high level here, output resampling stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, and Dolphin has done an excellent job explaining exactly every single option and even what output resampling is. I definitely recommend checking out this article. And as for resolution, the Dolphin development team decided to allow you to select up to 12 times, which equals about 8K, but there are a couple of notes here. They say just because Dolphin shows 12 times native in the GUI does not mean your computer can achieve it. 12 times native is 48.7 megapixels. Currently, most computers will run out of VRAM before reaching 12 times native. Statistically speaking, your computer will not run this resolution at full speed. Use this power responsibly. And they also say this change only applies to desktop, does not affect Dolphin on Android, and they don't need to explain that. And I don't think we need to either. I'd be surprised if an Android device could run Dolphin at 8K without any issues whatsoever. Maybe in 10 to 15 years, who knows. Additionally here, save states got an overhaul and they load about 72% faster. And in addition to all of that, there's been a whole bunch of bug fixes and even more improvements. The Dolphin development team has been extremely busy and they've got quite a bit to show for it. I can't wait to see what they do next. Next up here, we're talking about Sega and Virtua Fighter 3, and it appears that Sega is bringing back this game to Japanese arcades and calling it Virtua Fighter 3 TB Online. I've got no idea if this is going to release anywhere else here, but I've got my fingers crossed. Next up, we're talking about Ubisoft, and it appears that Ubisoft is in the news again and not for good reason, which seems to be normal. Anyways, here someone was playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey on Xbox and they got an advertisement in-game trying to access the menu. Unfortunately, this wasn't just a one-off case. Other people were reporting the exact same thing out of Assassin's Creed. And this makes me wonder if it's going to become a normal thing moving forward. Now, The Verge did reach out to Ubisoft about this one, and Ubisoft responded. I'll drop a link to the article in the description below. And the spokesperson from Ubisoft says, "We have been made aware that some players encountered pop-up ads while playing certain Assassin's Creed titles yesterday. This was the result of a technical error that we addressed as soon as we learned of the issue. I have a hard time believing about that. This seems pretty intentional, and players were outraged and Ubisoft seems to have backpedaled. I find it incredibly far-fetched that something like this would be a technical error. I mean, having an advertisement pop up when trying to access the map would probably have to be coded in. I don't understand how this would actually make its way in as a part of an error, especially considering it's saying Black Friday and not just some random ad. Now, to say people were unhappy with Ubisoft about this one might be a bit of an understatement. It was talked about quite a bit online yesterday and also today. And interestingly enough, Ubisoft is not the first company to do something like this. I mean, Capcom did this infamously with Street Fighter V. And they also had advertisements while waiting for an online match. Ads in a free-to-play game I can completely understand. Ads in a game you've paid for, I really can't get behind. Let me know your thoughts about this entire situation in the comments below. What are your thoughts on advertisements in-game? And what are your thoughts on Ubisoft's story here? Do you think it was a technical issue, or do you think this was intentional? Next up here, we're quickly talking about a couple of newly announced laptops that are built around Linux. The first one here is the Sirius 16 Gen 1 from Tuxedo, and this is an all AMD build. They say here that this is the first all AMD Linux gaming laptop, so you've got your AMD CPU and GPU. It features the Ryzen 7 7840HS, and for the GPU here, it's the Radeon RX 7600 MXT. The charging on this one's USB-C, which is amazing, not a proprietary barrel cable. The monitor on this one's 1440p at 165 Hz, and it can be configured up to 96 gigs of RAM. However, if you're configuring that high, it's going to set you back quite a bit. This starts at about €1,700, which equals about 1,800 give or take US dollars, and that's starting with 16 gigs of RAM. The second laptop announced is also from Tuxedo, which means it's also Linux focused, and it's the Pulse 14 Gen 3. It's a 14-inch as opposed to 16-inch. This one also features the AMD Ryzen 7 7840HS CPU. But for the GPU on this one, it's the AMD Radeon 780M, so not quite as powerful. And the RAM on this one doesn't go up to 96 gigs, considering the form factor is quite a bit smaller, but the price is also lower. The base version of the Pulse 14 ships with 32 gigs of RAM, and it'll set you back €1,111. It's not cheap, but I'd argue a lot easier to stomach when compared with that 16-inch model. This one does not perform near as well for gaming, but I'd actually prefer this one over the other. And next up here, we're quickly talking about Insignia. For those who may not be aware, Insignia is a replacement for Xbox Live on original Xbox consoles. And now a few more games are working with Insignia. We've got Far Cry Instincts, Far Cry Instincts Evolution, and Mortal Kombat Armageddon. If you use Insignia, let me know in the comments below. Next up here, we're talking about Wine, and Wine just dropped development release 8.21 with a few interesting things in it. The first one, high DPI scaling and initial Vulkan support in the Wayland driver. And the second thing here, beginnings of support for ARM64 EC Target. And on top of all of that, we've got a number of bug fixes here, specifically 29. So a couple of games have been fixed, including Death Stranding, where start and back buttons were reversed, and Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition that would quit on startup. Moving on, and we're very quickly talking about PS1 emulation on PC with Duckstation, and Duckstation just got a brand new update. So just the other day, we talked about Duckstation on Android getting a brand new update absolutely out of the blue, and now we've got the rest of the versions of Duckstation getting a brand new update. And this is the latest rolling release, and I would argue this update is huge here. We've got a number of bug fixes, a number of performance improvements, accuracy improvements, and also some brand new GUI improvements. If you are on Linux and using Wayland, just a friendly heads up here that both the app image and the Flatpak have Wayland disabled by default. Duckstation and Wayland, I would say, is not necessarily a match made in heaven, at least just yet. So if you are curious about the latest version of Duckstation, it's free, it's open source, and it's available on GitHub. I'll drop a link to it in the description below. And last up here, if you've got about 18 minutes on your hands, I'll drop a link to a YouTube video in the description below that I highly recommend checking out. This entire thing was built in Unreal Engine 5, and if you haven't guessed by the title already, it's The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in Studio Ghibli style. Ghibli? I'm not quite sure on how to say that correctly. Anyways, here it's highly entertaining, it's incredibly built, and it is something super, super cool. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. Or actually one fluff. She made a very brief appearance. Let me know your thoughts about anything we talked about today in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.